In today's episode, during listener Q&A, Daniel and I discuss how to conduct your due diligence before buying an old house.
And later, Georgia-based preservationist Caitlin Mee helps us kick off Historic Preservation Month.
But first, I'm Stacy Grinsfelder.
And I'm Daniel Cantor.
This is True Tales from Old Houses, episode 96. Hi, Daniel.
Hey, Stacy. How you doing?
Good. It's fun to record here together. We're at my house today.
I feel invigorated, refreshed. Just kidding. I'm really tired. But it is great to be here.
We've been working together this afternoon, and I felt like I kind of needed to give you a little short elbow in the ribs.
It's been a time. It was a busy weekend.
Yeah. Well, before we launch into all of that today, I do want to say a special thank you to our Season 9 sponsors, the Craftsman Store, Sutherland Wells, Preservan, and Abatron. This show would not happen without them.
No, it would not. And we have something very exciting that we will talk about coming up shortly.
Exactly. But before we do, it's like before, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of
There's a lot of befores. Yes, exactly. But we do have a few announcements. Why don't you go ahead and start, Daniel?
Well, so hopefully most of you already know, but Stacy and I have started to record mini episodes. So our first one dropped last week. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you have any feedback for us or things maybe we could talk about or just anything at all, just give us a shout.
Keep in mind, though, honestly, keep in mind that minisode is relative.
Right.
We did our best, but it's not. Sometimes I think of minisodes as like a 15, 20 minutes. This is a little bit longer than that. But compared to this regular show, it is mini.
I thought it flew right by.
It did. For us, it flew right by.
So if you like the minisodes and the regular episodes, we would love if you would leave us a rating or review on your podcast platform of choice. It's a great way to support us and the show and let other people know that it's worth listening to.
So the other announcement that I have, and I mentioned this last of the regular episodes, I should say, is that the Missouri Preservation Conference is June 7th through 9th. You can find out more about it through preservmo.org, and I am excited to be the keynote speaker this year. So if you'd like to come to the Missouri Preservation Conference and take advantage of all the wonderful offerings at the conference, I would love that, and they would too.
Very cool.
Or another thing that we have coming, we haven't done this in a really long time, and I have never done this with you, Daniel, but we're going to do another merch run.
Merch.
Yeah.
Merch.
Yeah. So when I worked with Devin, we did this a couple times. We did a merch run. And then when I took over as solo host, I also did a merch run. But we really haven't done this in quite some time. So basically, how we do the merch runs. Are you familiar with this or should I tell you?
Oh, I don't know anything.
Okay.
You've just sort of let me look at some websites.
I like throwing things at Daniel. He's so good at just going with the flow. But for merchandise, what we do is we take pre-orders because we're not a retail business. So we take pre-orders for a set amount of time. Once that set amount of time is over, then I place the order with my local printing company. They do a great job. They've done all our merch in the past. And then once it arrives, then you pay for it and I ship it. I know it's a little bit of a weird way of going about things. It's not like you can just go to the store and buy it and get it in your pocket or put it on your body 2 weeks later or whatnot. We do this pre-order situation, then the merch comes in, then you pay, then it gets shipped to you. So right now, Daniel and I are just deciding we're narrowing down the choices. We're kind of finalizing what we want to have. It'll be very similar to what we've had in the past, but we're kind of trying to tailor it for the seasons.
Yeah. And I think it's worth saying part of the reason that it's a little more of a rigmarole than some merch situations is that Stacy really cares about the quality of these items. So I have a sweatshirt. It is really nice. It's one of my favorite sweatshirts. Brad wears his like every day. So yeah, everything's really high quality and locally printed.
My friend small business does this. I'm a little particular. You are correct. I like soft things, and I like to make sure that what has our name on it is good quality. We're sending that out into the world. So, but we'll be able to take Venmo or PayPal or basically credit cards through PayPal. And if you are in New York, I do have to charge applicable sales tax because, it's what I have to do.
Right.
Yeah, just trying to keep everything on the up and up.
We all got to do it.
We all got to do it, yeah. The merch will be available for pre-order on Friday, May 12th, and we'll do that merch run through May 31st. So Friday, like I said, we're finalizing the choices. It'll be on the website, truetalesfromoldhouses.com. You'll be able to go in, pre-order, and go from there on Friday, May 12th.
And then you're going to look so hot this summer in your fresh new merch.
There you go. There you go. All right. Well, aside from announcements, it is kind of a big month in these parts. Not in my parts, in everybody's. Oh, in my parts. Hold on.
Let's talk about your parts.
My parts, yes. I'm about to have a few less parts. All right.
We can talk about that too.
With those announcements out of the way, I do want to mention something. It's kind of a big month for old house owners and historic folk.
Why?
Because it is Historic Preservation Month. May is Historic Preservation Month.
It's funny. You mentioned this, I think, yesterday, and I've never heard. I didn't know that was a thing. I'm a bad person.
That's hilarious because my next question was going to be, are you going to do anything to celebrate? And
yeah, plans on plans. I've been planning for 11 months.
Okay, you really did not know that May is Historic
No
Preservation
idea.
Month?
No clue.
Really?
Didn't know.
Even all this time you've been on social media, you had no idea?
I really feel like I should know.
I
just never heard it.
I don't feel like you should be personally invested in it, but I am kind of surprised that you didn't know.
I think I should be personally invested.
Okay, it would be good.
I stay above the fray, I can't get involved.
Right. Well, our guest today is Caitlin Mee. We mentioned that before. She's going to help us talk about Historic Preservation Month and preservation within her community. I love it. I love this month because and I mentioned this in her interview, so I'm not going to repeat myself, but basically I just learned so much during Historic Preservation Month just by following along social media. And for me, I'm not going to celebrate. I mean, I'm not going to bake a cake or anything, but I have been looking at all of these walking tours in Buffalo. You can buy like a pack of them where you do these, they just take you to all these historic places and historic streets and they're walking tours. And
you go inside?
I think you do. I think sometimes you stay outside, sometimes you go inside. It just depends on what the tour is. But I'm thinking, within your community, there might be something like that. If you're listening out there and you're thinking, wow, what could we do? I bet lots of historic places, house museums, that kind of thing, they'll open their doors for sort of special circumstances or whatnot for people to come and celebrate Historic Preservation Month.
Who knew? Well, you knew.
I knew.
Okay, can we make a deal, though?
Okay, what?
When we interview Caitlin, I'm just going to totally pretend like I know that I've known all along it was Historic Preservation Month, and don't embarrass me in front of Caitlin.
Your secret
Thank you.
Is safe with me.
The secret I just told everybody on recording.
Right.
Great.
Exactly. Okay. So Historic Preservation Month leads right into June, which leads into July, which is our 100th episode.
Did you say 100?
I did say 100.
Oh, my goodness.
We promised last episode that we would do giveaways.
I know.
And tell people what the giveaways were. So would you like to share what those giveaways are?
Oh, I would love to, because I just found out myself and they're wonderful. So the Craftsman store, Scott Seidler, has generously donated one free enrollment in the window course. So really great value there. Mm-hmm. Do I keep going?
Sure.
All right.
You do the next one, then I'll tell.
Okay. So our friends at Abitron, which is now a division of UC Coatings, are offering a 4-quart liquid wood and wood epox kit. These are products that both Stacy and I love, and you will too. And you can try them for free if you win this giveaway.
Yeah, that kit's really neat too, because it comes with even a squeeze bottle for the liquid wood. It has a little bit of the wood epox in it, the 2 parts. So you can it actually stretches quite far. Yeah. I usually buy them in that size because it lasts so long. Has some gloves. It's pretty nifty. I like it. So Sutherland Wells is offering a woodworker sample kit, and it's 3 of their popular interior finishes and just some general finishing supplies. There's, I think, a brush and some steel wool and that kind of thing. And then finally, Daniel and I are going to be offering for the 4th item, a merch item of your choice.
Anything you want.
Anything you want. Well, that we offer.
Right.
The sky is not the limit here. But once we get those merch choices available on the website, then you can enter to win one of your choice. So the giveaway, we talked about when the merch will be live, but the giveaways will also be live on truetales.oldhouses.com on Friday, May 12th. We're going to be talking about them between now and our 100th episode when we announce the winners. So enter, and share. And I'm so excited for you.
Yes.
All right. We had a lot to say today, huh? A lot to tell.
There's so many announcements, so much administration of our big business of podcasting.
Podcasting admin, yes.
Yes.
But what else have you been up to?
Oh, well, it's been a busy time. So I'm here in your home recording today because I've been at the lake working with Brad on the lake house. We're aiming to be done by the end of the month, so we only have a couple more weeks.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It's crazy.
Are you going to make it?
Stacy, I don't know. I mean, it's funny because in my mind, it's like, no, absolutely not. And then I sort of watched Brad move through these projects and things just sort of seem to like work and move along in a pretty seamless fashion. I don't know. The boys got something special, so maybe we're fine. Yeah, so that's pretty much where we are is a very long punch list. It's exciting and sort of a pain too, because it's like nothing's all that exciting in terms of big changes,
right.
But it's still work. But
it's all got to be done though.
Can I tell you? So we talked before about how Brad and I are terrible about eating.
Oh,
He doesn't feed me. Well, that's still sort of true because he doesn't have to feed me because I made our first meal in the kitchen.
The kitchen? You can cook in your kitchen.
We can cook in the kitchen. So the fridge is on site, but not in the house yet. But he doesn't. We have a little mini fridge, but honestly, it's still so cold here that the whole house is kind of a fridge. But yeah, I made a spaghetti and meatball dinner, the classic.
So cooking, that is a game changer.
It's such a game changer.
That feels like a home once you can cook a meal.
Absolutely.
And flush the toilet.
Yeah, and we can do that now too. He fixed the flapper.
Can you shower?
Really coming together. Yeah.
Ah, yeah. So you can take care of basic sanitation and eating.
Yeah, we're really moving on up.
So, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
I'm really happy for you too.
Thank you. It's getting very exciting. The end is in sight.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
wonderful.
My own project is
the cottage, right?
The cottage kind of end is more in sight than it has been. The house finally got taped and mudded, all the sheetrock. And that was a really big job. It was a challenging job in part because they're working around, like all of my millwork is done already. So it makes the finish work a little harder.
Yeah.
And because the hanging job was such a disaster. So these guys really, I haven't seen the final product because they finished while I was already here, but I'm excited to get home and hopefully be thrilled by how beautiful and smooth my walls are.
Let's just go with you're going to be thrilled.
I'm going to be so thrilled.
All right. Yeah, you need a win, so you're going to be thrilled.
Badly. So yeah, there's like 3 things that I'm like, I have to hire. One of them was the tape and mud, so that's now done. The other is floors, and the third is the boiler and getting the radiator
plumbing and stuff. Huh?
Yeah, so 1 out of 3 done.
That's excellent. That must feel great.
How about you? What you into?
Well, I'm getting prepared for window workshop that I'm teaching actually in Silver Lake. You cannot get rid of me.
I will
You are
there.
trying to get rid of me probably at this point, but you cannot get rid of me.
Absolutely not.
I've been going down on weekends and I've been talking to the project. I don't know what he does. I don't know what he does.
He's I think the groundskeeper.
The groundskeeper. Okay, so I've been talking to him. His name is Craig. He's wonderful, super helpful. He knows what's what. And he pulled a bunch of windows for me. So I picked those up. I've been prioritizing getting some of that pre-work done for the workshop. I've been working on my own windows. I can't see I think I talked about last time about not seeing, or at least maybe on the Minnesota, about not seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. There is no light. It's all tunnel right now. But forward momentum is still forward. The window workshop is at the end of July, and I'm hoping to get a lot of that pre-work done actually this month in May, because I've got to go to Missouri in June. And then from there, the summer it's a race at that point.
That workshop, it's going to be really fun. I hope we get to do it again.
I do too. It sold out really fast.
So fast.
I was thrilled that it sold out, but then I was also sad because I thought, all these people that could have been there weren't able to get in. So I'm planning for that for next time. I'm trying to come up with a model of these workshops that works to accommodate more people.
I have a model. Just come to my house and restore all my windows
your
on
windows.
a weekend.
All right. Well, Daniel, we have to take a break.
Oh, okay.
All right. So let's go. Let's take a break.
All right.
Listener Q&A is up next.
Yes.
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by the Craftsman Store, another excellent resource from Scott Seidler of the Craftsman blog. The Craftsman Store is your go-to place for old house tools and supplies.
Once again, our old pal Scott has taken the hassle out of tracking down all those specialized little old house supplies that we need and put them all in one place for us. So it's a cozy little online hardware store full of books, tools, replacement parts, and more.
I buy some window restoration supplies from the Craftsman Store, including diamond glazing points, because they're very difficult to find. I know I'm always talking about that. It's just because it's so frustrating when you can't find what you're looking for. So I suggest always checking Scott's store first. He runs a top-notch small business, and the customer service is an actual human. I think they ship just as fast as other online retailers.
So from window restoration to plaster repair, they have everything you need to do the job like a pro. So check it out today at thecraftsmanstore.com and save 10% on your order if you use the code TRUETALES.
True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Preservan, a unique preservation franchise opportunity developed by longtime window restoration pro Ty McBride. The mission of Preservan is to save the future by preserving the past.
So you've told me before, but tell me again, what exactly is Preservan?
Well, I'm actually glad that you asked, because I think that maybe I have not been doing the best job explaining what Preservan is. It is a preservation franchise for wood rot repair. Old or new, doesn't really matter. Ty started Preservan in Oklahoma, and now anyone in the United States can open their own Preservan franchise. As a franchise owner, the team at Preservan will train and equip you with the tools you need to perform sustainable wood rot repairs and build your own team of what they call epoxy techs. You'll receive the playbook for a proven preservation business, exclusive access to ever-resin epoxy products, business software, and all of the marketing, advertising, training, and technical support you need. The Preservan family is focused on creating work-life balance while serving your neighbors and community in a recession-proof industry. Those are values that Ty holds dear, and he wants you to be able to work your own hours and spend the rest of your time in ways that are important to you.
So to learn more about becoming a part of the Preservan family and their mission, go to preservanfranchise.com. That's PRESERVAN, preservanfranchise.com/truetales.
All right, we are back, and it's time for listener Q&A.
What do you have for us today?
Well, today's question comes from Larissa, and she asks, when old house shopping, what kind of professionals do you call in other than a traditional home inspector to ensure that you're not getting in over your head financially or with the workload? This question is not for me. This question is for you, Daniel. I'm trying to think of how many houses I bought. 1, 2, 3, 4 houses. Yeah, I bought 4 houses, and I never used anyone except for an inspector. Now, I'm familiar with other types of professionals, but I haven't actually called one in. But I know you have more experience with that, so I'm going to really rely on you for this answer.
Well, I've bought 2 houses, so I'm not sure I do have more experience. Okay, so I think the first thing I would say is that a traditional home inspector is a good place to start, especially if this is your first home. So I would say there's variation in kind of quality and what you're going to get with home inspectors, but the going rates tend to be about the same. So I would consult if you know anyone, if your realtor has a recommendation, or Nextdoor will often have good recommendations for this kind of thing.
If you want to get into that mess.
Right. I mean, at your own peril, but...
We're talking about nextdoor.com. That's an online community of your neighbors where you really find out what kind of people they are.
Yeah.
Anyhow, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah. And
for better or for worse.
You'll learn things you don't want, but maybe some things you do want. So I would say, try to find one that people have had a good experience with. However, recognize that home inspectors are just inspectors. They are not there to renovate the house or open a wall or do it all visual. So if they can't see it, it doesn't exist. So from there,
Can I interject something real quick,
absolutely.
though? All right. So because I have used a home inspector, and I know you're going to go a little deeper here with other professionals, but I was going to say, if your realtor represents both the buyer and the seller, then you should probably get an inspector that represents just you, someone that you choose for yourself. Because you don't really want the seller's inspector to come and inspect the house for you as the buyer, because sometimes they're acting in the best interest of the seller.
Yes.
Not the buyer.
Avoid conflicts of interest in general.
That's probably the fastest way that we could have said that. Go ahead.
No, but I liked it. So I think once you have that inspection report, which they generally turn around quickly within a few days, review it. And if there are certain things that jump out, then it's a good time to bring in additional professionals. So I think it's important to bear in mind how much of the work you think you'll do yourself. But in most places, doing electrical or plumbing work legally would have to be done by a licensed professional, which you may not be.
Often permitted, too.
And permitted, yeah. So in my house, when I was buying it, I knew that the electric panel was a big old fire hazard and my service was too low. So I had an electrician come in and just give me a quote for having the service upgraded and the panel redone. So I knew kind of what I was working with there. Same thing with the plumbing. I wasn't planning to renovate bathrooms right away or do anything crazy right away, but I knew that I'd probably have some burst pipes and no burst waistline. And the big ticket was that I needed a boiler. So I got that stuff quoted. And then the third thing was the roof. So my agent, because I didn't live there at the time, coordinated actually 3 different roofing companies to give 3 different estimates. And so then I had a pretty good sense of what the big stuff was going to cost. Of course, at the time, I thought that I was going to skim coat all of my plaster myself. And so it didn't even occur to me to have that quoted out. But that's something a lot of people run into. But yeah, I think anything that use your common sense sounds like it'll be costly, maybe try to figure out.
So I guess maybe I know a little bit more than I thought I knew, because when I heard you talking about the plumber, you also, if you're in the country, you might have a septic tank and septic system, and you definitely want to have that inspected before you agree to buy the house, because replacing a septic system is very, very expensive. Now, we've talked about in the past with lots of other listener Q&A and just in general that something that's a deal breaker for me may not be a deal breaker for you. The purpose of all these inspections is to know what you're getting yourself into and whether that's something that you want to do. So I just want to repeat that, because one person's deal breaker is not necessarily another person's.
Totally. And I think we just have to bear in mind that you can have as many inspections as you want by as many different people as you want. They will not find everything. These houses are full of surprises. All of those cliches are true. So I think on the bright side, they've been standing a century or more or less or whatever, and you don't have to do it all right away.
We had some expensive things come up with our house right away. Some things we knew, some things we didn't. And I remember I was mentioning something probably on Facebook before I abandoned that altogether. And I remember somebody's response was, well, didn't your inspector tell you about that? Inspectors, like you said, they are not fortune tellers. They cannot tell you when something is going to go or when something is going to break. And we didn't really have a leg to stand on with our inspection either. The inspection was just for us. But because we were in a situation with our purchase where we didn't get to negotiate down. We were buying from an estate, and they just wanted the price. There was no negotiating.
Mhm.
So it was basically just an FYI.
Yeah, that's exactly how mine was.
Right.
And we sort of knew what the issues were.
So when do you think you would call in? I would call in a structural engineer if it was something like masonry, maybe. Brick, like a big brick house. I think I would really want to know if I saw a crack or something that just led me to believe that we were going to have a major cave-in.
Yeah, I think if there's sort of visual signs of structural failure, so like you said, in a masonry house, if there's a kind of big crack that runs all the way down a wall or something, that is red flag. And certainly if your inspector notes that there may be some structural issue, often these things are not actually that expensive to deal with. Like if it's, you need new support posts in the basement, that's a really common thing in old houses. That's not a huge deal. But on the flip side, if you have to lift your house and pour a new foundation, that might be kind of a bigger deal. Yeah.
All right. So hopefully that helps. And Larissa, thank you so much for that excellent question. If anybody else out there has a question for Daniel and I to answer on an upcoming episode, please go to truetalesfromoldhouses.com and submit it through the contact form. And if your question is too technical for us, then we will try to find a pro to answer it. Well, we need to take another quick break.
I'd love to. Stacy, I've bought 3 houses.
Oh, 3 houses. Now you remember.
What's wrong with me?
True Tales from Old Houses is supported by Sutherland Wells. All of Sutherland Wells products are handcrafted in Providence, Rhode Island with the highest quality, sustainably grown tung oil. Tung oil, native to China, has been used for centuries as a durable finish for wood, metal, and stone.
All right, I need you to listen to this, and I need you to listen carefully. Unlike polyurethane, tung oil finish penetrates the surface of the wood, so it flexes and contracts as conditions change, which makes it the perfect pre-finish or protectant for everything from fine furniture to window sash and sills.
All right, so remember my friend, the woodworker. This has been an ongoing story.
Yes, I need updates.
All right, so he was making a painted cabinet for his daughter. Then he decided not to paint it. Then he was sure he was going to use polyurethane. I said, no, bad idea. Bad idea.
We don't do that.
Well, he went back to Sutherland Wells and chose their wiping varnish. The base cabinet's made from maple. The top is made from walnut, and it is gorgeous.
Beautiful.
Yes. So besides the wiping varnish, Sutherland Wells has an entire product line for whatever you're working on right now, whether it's siding, hardwood floors, furniture restoration, cutting boards, you name it.
So to learn more about the complete product line, please visit Sutherland Wells, that's WELLES, sutherlandwells.com. And to save 10% on your first order, use the coupon code TRUETALES. True Tales from Old Houses is also supported by Abitron, which is now a division of UC Coatings.
Abitron manufactures 2 of my favorite products, the liquid wood and wood epox. I've talked about them a lot on the blog. I've talked about them a lot on Instagram, and I will continue to do so because I think they're fantastic.
You really love those products.
I really do. It's not just for the commercial. I really love those products.
Like a lot.
Yes.
She really does.
I actually have something called AboWeld 55-1. It's downstairs for me to try on this big concrete crack that I have. And I'm just waiting for the weather to turn warm enough so that I can try it. And then I will come back on hopefully the next commercial and I will tell you my experience.
Yes, please report back.
I will. Abitron products are super easy to use. The instructions are simple and the results are exceptional. There's no shrinking or sagging. And with the liquid wood and wood epox, those repairs can be sanded and painted just like wood.
So in addition to wood repair, Abitron also offers other great products for old homes, specifically for concrete repair.
Like I mentioned.
Yes, you did. Plaster repair, window glazing, and more.
Check out their website at abitron.com or follow them on Instagram at abitron_UC or on Facebook at Abitron, a division of UC Coatings.
And from now until May 19th, Abitron has a special coupon code just for True Tales from Old Houses listeners. Enter FIX10 at abitron.com for 10% off your order. That's FIX10 to save 10% on your order at abitron.com.
Our guest today is Caitlin Mee, best known on Instagram as the Preservation Peach.
My name is Caitlin Mee. I am an architectural historian and historic preservationist based out of Macon, Georgia. I originally hail from Northern California, but I have assimilated fully into Southern life and have assumed the pseudonym The Preservation Peach on Instagram.
Welcome to True Tales from Old Houses, Caitlin.
Happy to be here.
This month is Historic Preservation Month, which is kind of like the playoffs leading to the Super Bowl for preservationists. And it's actually one of my favorite months on social media because I get the chance to learn about new areas of conservation, little geographical pockets of history, and really cool old buildings. And this is really the month where I fully glamorize preservation and architectural history because everything seems so sparkly and happy. Does it seem that way to you?
No.
Okay, hold that thought, Caitlin. Hold that thought. Because I read a quote from you that I really liked, and I wanted to read it so that our listeners could hear it too. And something that you said was, I see preservation in all things. I see preservation as the solution to almost anything. Economic development, housing, sustainability, quality of life, you name it. And then you went on to talk about your path to becoming an accredited preservationist and architectural historian. So let's actually start there, and then we'll go back to that loaded answer you just gave us a few seconds ago. So go ahead.
Yes, yeah. I like to call it my origin story, like the origin story. How did I get here?
Yes.
Okay. So as I get older, I remember things early on that really led me to where I am today. Small things like begging my mom at 10 years old to take me into an antique store, even though she hated it. You know, like I just always loved old things. And then as I got older, I think it refined. I started studying history. And of course, you're met with a lot of pushback like, oh, you're not going to find a job doing that. And so discouraged, I dabbled in psychology and some other fields of study before finally just giving up and studying what I'm passionate about, which is history. And I interned at an archive, the Placer County Archives in Northern California, where the gold rush was, and studied border towns, as they're called. My mentor back in Sacramento called them border towns. So places like Placerville, Yosemite, Denver, Colorado Springs, towns and cities that developed as a city right next to gold rush diggings and kind of the social history based around them. And so I was already kind of dabbling in the built environment and the history of it, and I knew that I liked the buildings. I grew up around a lot of, in the West, we have all these really cool Italianate style wood buildings still. And I just was always really impressed by them and mystified. And then I found out that the house that I grew up in on my dad's side, my paternal grandfather, he was an immigrant from England and always wanted to be an architect, but didn't have money to become one. So he became a draftsman and he designed, which now as an architectural historian, I know is actually a really interesting, well done designed house, mid-century modern house in the San Francisco Bay Area. And my granny and her 8 siblings helped build it.
Oh, so, wow. That's neat.
I was like, wow, it's kind of, in the blood. And I was searching for a public history program and happened upon Georgia State University's preservation program and reached out to Richard Lobb, who's the director. And I'm not a good student. I hate sitting in classrooms and being lectured at. And I was convinced that I wouldn't get into grad school. I barely made it through my undergraduate, but Richard just really encouraged me to just apply. He's like, you're getting, just apply. And he was really good at indoctrinating us early on to the dark side of historic preservation. I love my public historians, but I chose the dark side that day and the rest is history.
So that's really interesting. So you're not from Georgia. I thought you were from Georgia.
Yeah. So, and funny, the story behind my name, it's of course a trivia group that some of my classmates and I came up with one night. We were the Preservation Peaches. And I was like, that's really cute. So I took it.
What does the actual accreditation process entail once you get there?
So you typically, actually, you can get a bachelor's degree in historic preservation, a certificate in historic preservation, and a master's degree. The master's degree is like, what do they call that? It's the end of the road. There's no PhD in architectural history. That's really all you need to go, which I personally like because I like continuing education, but I hate going into more student debt, as we all do.
Sure.
So you usually, in each program is different. I'm actually on the University Partnership Subcommittee with the American Cultural Resource Management Association. And we're a group of professionals who are partnering with directors of programs like the one I went to at Georgia State to refine coursework. So I've learned a lot about different programs across the country for preservation and what their offerings are, and it's really neat. But you typically learn intro to historic preservation, that's a must, a history of American architecture, and you learn about the National Register for Historic Places criteria and how they're applied. My program, which I really loved when I went, exposed us to a lot of people who were in the field. They would come into our classes, they were applicable. So for instance, I had a preservation planning class and we got to meet Monica Callahan and Ken Coker out of Madison, Georgia, who are just giants in the Georgia preservation world. And you learn about what they do as preservation planners and city planners and how preservation works. And so I remember Burke Reeves, who worked with South Face, which is like a lead green engineering firm. And Burke, who was a graduate, I believe, of Georgia State, taught us how he does energy audits for historic buildings and how he sensitively retrofits historic buildings to be energy efficient. So we got a really good exposure to all the different things you can do under the preservation umbrella.
Mm-hmm. That's neat. So did what you think preservation was end up lining up with your education, or did it sort of blow your mind?
Oh, yes. Yes. I remember being a little preservation baby sitting in class and meeting people that do what I do now, or meeting people like Monica who just inspired me so much. They were so knowledgeable in their field and they got to do so many cool things that I was like, I want to do that. So I have like this list of dream jobs that I've been like checking the boxes on for a long time. And the cultural resource management dream job is one that I've seemed to stay in the longest. And it's definitely what I expected and more. And I think that's why I've stayed put.
So what does cultural resource management entail?
Oh, and I feel like what is so exciting about being in this field right now is that the definition is evolving. It's been thought of in our field a lot as just archaeology. And it's kind of a duh, like, of course, architectural historians and historic preservation are part of it. But for some reason, there's been a disconnect in our field. And that's why I got involved with the ACRA, the American Cultural Resource Association, to kind of inspire more architectural historians to become involved and balance out all these crazy archaeologists. But since becoming involved with ACRA and meeting even more people who are in the CRM world, it involves also like landscape architects. It's really anybody who works professionally in managing the preservation and promotion of cultural resources. And that can be the built environment like buildings. It can be archaeological resources, indigenous artifacts, things like this, and contextualizing that history, and also landscape architects. I have friends who are cultural landscape architects, specifically where they're helping to interpret, for example, I'd love to have a cultural landscape architect help us interpret an old granite quarry that was worked by a formerly enslaved individual here in Jones County. So they're kind of looking at the land, maybe a cemetery even would be good for a cultural landscape architect. So it's anything you can work your mind around.
That's so interesting to me because Daniel and I'm doing all the talking today, but Daniel and I live in an area with a rich history of Olmsted parks, Frederick Olmsted parks, where he created these parks.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
He was very particular about how the landscaping went in, all the trees, what it looked like. Over the years, they've sort of changed and grown, but then people come in and try to put them back to a certain degree. It'll never be quite the way Mr. Olmsted wanted it. But that's interesting. I never really thought about it that way, but that's neat. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Riverside Cemetery here in Macon was an Olmsted landscape.
He was all over the place, wasn't he?
Oh, yeah. There's a lot. Inman Park is another historic district in Atlanta that has Olmsted landscape. And I think there might be another one in Buckhead. And I know he did a lot in Savannah as well.
I don't think I knew
no
that.
idea.
No.
I thought he was kind of all over New York State because he did Central Park, of course, and then he basically planned Buffalo.
Right.
He did, yeah, the parks in Buffalo, and then he did the state fair the World's Fair in Chicago.
Oh, right, of course.
He was involved in the site of the World's Fair in Chicago.
Right.
And also the Emerald Necklace.
Oh, I don't know the Emerald Necklace.
The Emerald Necklace in Boston.
Oh, okay. Huh.
Cool.
I have so much to learn.
It's a cool, linear park.
Well, it's nice that we get to ask you all these questions about what someone in your field does, because we don't have a lot of people on the show that we ask those types of questions to. Most of the time we're talking to homeowners or sort of grassroots organizations, that kind of thing. So this is really fun. I've never gotten to pick the brain of someone who has your job. So this is fantastic.
So I've been to Savannah for about 5 minutes. We did one house tour and left.
You must come back.
I know, it was so beautiful. And so I know Savannah is very preservation forward and, really values their old buildings. I don't know anything about Macon. So do you feel like it's a preservation friendly place? What's the lay of the land down there?
A loaded question. And I am tenacious enough to answer honestly, because I feel like that will do it justice. But Macon, I have had a preservation crush on for years. There are very little new development in our downtown and surrounding residential areas. And I feel like it is this magical place you can find a building from the early to mid 1800s, like pre-Civil War, from very plain and just very well built, craftsmanship, to the most ornate historic architectural styles you have ever seen, all the way to, mid-century. There's even a local historian who wrote a book on Macon's mid-century architecture, because we've got some really beautiful homes that are mid-century modern and contemporary and stuff. And Historic Macon Foundation historically is really fantastic on helping to preserve these resources. They have done a lot of work downtown. Newtown is an organization also that provides a lot of economic incentives for businesses locating downtown, supporting small business owners, things like that. I think with the field in general, and it's showing here in Macon, that it's time to change it up a lot of it. I think that everything has changed because since I feel like COVID really kicked off the universe in a tailspin of getting rid of dying systems, working from home and treatment at work, a lot surrounding work. And then, with culturally, I think it really kicked off it brought to light that there were some things that needed to be revisited. And in the South, especially, and Macon is a very good example of that, there is an old guard. And last night I was talking to some of my friends here in Macon who are preservationists. What are they called? Passive preservationists? I think Sarah Marsom came out with these really great definitions, but they are preservationists nonetheless. Yeah. I talked about preservationists of the old guard. There's a lot of those in Macon. It's not very inclusive, even to people like myself that are just, I think, a little more laid back. I'm not so much a purist in how I approach my preservation. I'm not really big, fancy buildings don't really float my boat. I like shotgun houses and workers, mill villages. And I want to see the nuts and bolts of a city, of a house, of a town. I want to learn about the people that I identify with, because that was my family. You know, they were working class immigrant family. And I think that's why I'm so interested in that. And there's so much of that here in Macon. And that is where it's kind of stopped. There's really no efforts to preserve that narrative in Macon, sadly. Since the beginning of this year, the city has demolished over 400 shotgun houses and historic buildings. And they do it as a solution to blight and slum removal, which is all too reminiscent of the urban renewal period that was very geared toward historically Black communities. And it's doing that now. So that's kind of really across the nation. It's not just the Macon problem, you know, where I think preservation is falling short.
Sure.
Long answer.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I've got a follow-up question for you because I want to make sure that I understand. So are you saying basically that, I think this is really a common problem. The more people I talk to, the more I'm hearing the same thing, is that people are really into the fancy, shiny buildings and they're willing to do anything for them. But when it comes to the rest of the community, they're not as invested. Is that kind of what you're saying here?
Yes. Yeah. I think reframing what we look at as historic preservation of, it's not just big, fancy, shiny buildings. It's especially preservation, truly, if we think about our predecessors like Jane Jacobs and people like that, you know, Jane Jacobs really like the most famous preservationist,
Sure.
of course. They weren't advocating for big white columns. There were organizations that were, you know, this is how we have Mount Vernon, and I think it's the grand dames of something that saved everything in Savannah and Charleston and all that fun stuff. But now that's good. You know, that's preserved. They're house museums. There's plenty of folks that love all that beautiful ornate architecture. I mean, I do, but we need to rally around all the other built environment that has gone undervalued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Completely agree. This is a problem in my city too, Kingston. If you look at the map of what they've considered historic and not, it's just racist. Like, I don't know how else to describe it, because it's like kind of Doctor's Row or whatever you want to call it. That's street every city has, that's historic. But the street that I live on, which was built at exactly the same time, is, you know, more working class. So do whatever. And of course, it's the wealthier neighborhood where people don't need to be told how to preserve their house as much as the landlord that is just going to put whatever in because no one's telling him he can't. Anyway.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah. I think that I've noticed, and this is purely a me problem. This is not everybody else problem, but, you know, it's just something that I started to realize that I started to come around too, because I think I thought of the big shiny buildings too. Not that they necessarily represented me by any means. That is not the way I grew up. But I think that when I first started really paying attention, it was the big buildings, and those caught my eye too. And that's not really the case anymore. It's kind of it's part of the learning process, I think, for us as people who are not accredited and educated in this field to start to understand and notice what's going on in our communities. And it's our responsibility, quite frankly.
Exactly. Big fancy houses are a gateway drug.
I like that. That's another quote I'm going to use from you now. Big fancy houses are a gateway drug.
Have it. Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah.
And May is also a really good month to remind people that 50 years old or older is considered historic. And that is a moving target. So we will all have our time where we are historic. And I like to remind people of that because it opens their mind to what parts of their built environment should be looked at as historic. And I think a lot of people are confused because, and I was too at one point, even as a professional, there's people that say historic in this way and historic in this way. And some people, especially even in the preservation field, some preservations will say historic because it is something that has been deemed historic, not necessarily obviously by its age, but it's been deemed historic by the National Register or local preservation or like organization or something. Or then, I will just say historic because it's just of historic age. And then eligible or significant to describe that, it's confusing terminology.
Yeah, it is. And that brings up a good point. How much of a stickler are you for semantics? Because sometimes it can be confusing, but then sometimes not being a stickler can help other people get involved. If they feel like reprimanded for saying things a certain way, then they think, okay, this field's not for me.
One thing that I have absolutely loved about my platform on Instagram is to bring preservation to everybody. And I've noticed that even outside of preservation, city planning terminology, things like this is super exclusionary. It's using words where you basically have to be a lawyer or have a master's degree in that field to understand what somebody's saying. And I think even on Instagram and when I've presented to cities, when I'm trying to work with them professionally, using terminology that is just understandable, I think is super important because my core value is that preservation is for everybody. And if I have to, I don't believe it's dumbing it down. I just feel like it's making it understandable for anybody to explain. It's funny, last night I'm sitting with my neighbor friends, same folks, and we're discussing the differences between the term conservation and preservation. And largely that's, long story short, conservation is used more commonly in Europe for preservation. It's in America, it means more so for the natural environment, preservation of the natural environment. I like to, and I have highlights in my Instagram that describe what professional preservationists use. And instead of I like to educate over make somebody feel bad because they don't know something. So it's like, oh, I hear that you're trying to describe rehabilitation when you say renovation. We say rehabilitation when you're altering, like a lot of our old house buddies, when they're altering a historic house to be useful in a modern world, it's rehabilitation. Professionally, I am a little bit more of a stickler because we all have master's degrees and I expect you to know these words. But even then, I'm pretty laid back about it because there's regional terms that vary. In Georgia, we call this one house type an American small house, and nowhere else in the country is it called that. It's a minimal traditional. Mm-hmm. We just have to be extra, I guess.
An American small house. That's so cute.
And there's American small house extended.
Aww.
Yeah, it's a little house. It's very small.
That's cute. People tell me all the time, they come and they ask me questions about windows and they apologize. They're like, I'm sorry, I don't know the name of that part. And I said, you know what? It doesn't matter. It does not matter. Just tell me what you're pointing at. Tell me what it kind of looks like, and then I give them the term. But I think it's sad when people feel like they can't ask a question to anyone. They don't mind asking me. They're like, sometimes people will say, I like asking you questions about windows because you don't make me feel stupid. And I'm like, that's great.
Or tell me to replace them with vinyl.
Yeah. Either of those things. Yeah. So I really appreciate that about you, Caitlin, that you are so approachable and so easygoing about that kind of stuff, because everybody has to start. Their chapter one is different. Everyone's chapter one is different. I've said that a million times on the show. You'll hear it again, but we're all starting someplace different.
Right.
I love this idea, this value of making preservation accessible to everyone. So in light of that, what advice can you give people for how to get involved in that work in their community? Because I think a lot of people care deeply about it, but don't know kind of what to do with that care.
Always volunteer. I get this question a lot in my Instagram, both how can I get involved in my local community, and then also how did you get your degree, and like how did you know what to do, etc. Which I even have a highlight in my Instagram where I talk about some of the schools that have preservation degree programs, both for bachelor's, certificate, and master's. And it's so funny because I didn't start from I went straight for school. But I think if I was wanting to be involved with preservation, I would probably reach out to or Google local preservation organizations. Most towns have at least a historical society. These are kind of, some of them can be kind of dry, But sometimes it's because they don't have, like some young, fresh blood to reinvigorate maybe their offerings for programs and things like that.
They don't have a preservation peach.
Yeah, they need, anybody can be a preservation peach. Like, you just walk up, I think I bumped into, there was a lady I follow on Instagram, Liza, and she was telling me how unapologetic she is. And I'm the same way. My entitlement is in that I'm a preservationist, so I am allowed to be anywhere that's old. And here's my preservation card, let me in. And I want to see the back and I want to touch the things and all that stuff. And Liza was telling me, I guess her and a friend, Victoria, who does the Archives Atlanta podcast, they were walking around Atlanta and they were talking about wanting to see inside some building. And Liza just marched up and knocked on the door. Can we see inside your house? And I was like, as a historic homeowner, and a preservationist, I'd probably let somebody in. It kind of happened to me when a previous owner did that. And I walked around the house and stuff. But I think just being that bold, honestly, I wish there were more people that would just march up to me and even locally or anywhere else for that matter, or march up to their preservation organization and say, hey, I want to help. What can I do? How can I get involved? And I know a lot of nonprofits would probably be thankful to have the volunteer.
I also support that, but please do not show up at my door and ask for a tour. Thank you. I don't even open it if I know who it is, if I'm not expecting them.
I might still anyway. Please let me in.
For you, yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And before we wrap up, I wondered if you could tell people how to find you on Instagram and just ways that they can find out more about your work.
So I'm at the Preservation Peach on Instagram, and I'm pretty exclusively on Instagram. I have been toying around with doing some sort of YouTube situation because I just get myself into so much that it'd be fun to share even more with people. And as a lot of us probably are getting a little tired of Instagram, it's a little limiting, but that's pretty much me. I volunteer with ACRA, the American Cultural Resource Association. So if you're interested in learning more about cultural resource management, that's a great place to start. We actually have a list of ACRA accredited preservation programs. As part of what I do on that subcommittee is we look through their coursework and approve it as being acceptable to basically create a pipeline of archaeologists and architectural historians into the cultural resource management field. And then please, 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 please always DM me, message me, ask me questions. If I don't respond, it's because I do get a lot of messages and I'm still trying to figure out how to manage that. So if any other people on Instagram have tips.
Nope, not us.
But if you learn any, feel free to just pass it along.
I think it's the Preservation Peach, the Preservation Peach at gmail.com. So there is an email too, if you want to reach out to me that way. That's another good way.
Thank you so much for joining us, Caitlin. It's really nice to meet you. Stacy and I are planning our cross-country, around the country road trip. So
Georgia.
Macon is now on the list.
Oh my gosh, please come to Georgia. Come to Macon. Definitely hit up Savannah. Absolutely. Yes, please.
Well, thank you so much for your time, Caitlin.
It's been so fun meeting with you guys.
Thank you for listening to True Tales from Old Houses, and thank you to today's guest, Caitlin Mee.
To continue the conversation, please join us over on Facebook and Instagram at True Tales from Old Houses. You can follow Stacy at Blake Hill House or myself at Daniel Cantor. And to learn more about everything we discussed in today's episode or to request a transcript, please visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Until next time.
See you soon.